My parents said I was a disgrace. Those were the exact words my mother threw at me the night I packed my bags and left their house for good. I had just turned 21, and I had chosen a path they didn't approve of. They wanted me to marry young, settle into a predictable life, and never question their authority. Instead, I pursued my own dreams, my own independence. For years, I carried the sting of those words, letting them harden me. I told myself I would never forgive them, never go back, and never let them see me vulnerable again. So when I got the phone call, nearly 15 years later, hearing the same parents who had rejected me now begging for my help, my first reaction was bitter laughter. The irony was too sharp to ignore. The daughter they had labeled a disgrace was suddenly their only hope. My name is Rachel, and I am 36 years old. After years of building a career, saving carefully, and fighting for every opportunity on my own, I had carved out a life for myself. I had a steady income, a modest home, and a sense of dignity I thought I'd never regain. But now I was faced with a decision that made my chest tighten. My parents were about to lose their house. The same house where they had raised me, criticized me, and eventually pushed me out. They were drowning in debt, $350,000 to be exact. The bank was ready to take everything. And the only person they could turn to was me. I sat there with the phone pressed to my ear, my father's voice trembling in a way I had never heard before. It was the first time in my life he sounded human, vulnerable, almost broken, and yet I couldn't ignore the voice inside me screaming, "Where was this compassion when I needed it? Where was this humility when you called me a disgrace?" That night, I didn't give them an answer. I simply said I needed time to think. But deep down, I knew this was the beginning of a storm I had spent my entire adult life trying to avoid. The day I finally agreed to meet them, my chest felt tight the entire drive over. It had been nearly 15 years since I last walked through their front door. The house looked smaller than I remembered, weathered by time and neglect, the paint peeling from the porch rails. For a second, I considered turning the car around, but curiosity and a strange, gnawing sense of duty kept me moving forward. When my father opened the door, I barely recognized him. His once broad shoulders were hunched, and his hair had thinned to a patchy gray. He forced a smile that looked more like an apology than a greeting. My mother, however, stood behind him with her arms crossed, her eyes sharp as knives. "Well," she said coldly, "the disgrace returns." The words hit me harder than I expected. After all these years, she hadn't softened. Not even now, when she was the one in need. I stepped inside without answering, my heels clicking against the faded hardwood floor. The living room felt frozen in time. The same curtains, the same outdated furniture, the same sense of suffocation. My father motioned for me to sit, but my mother remained standing, her posture stiff, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Why am I here, exactly?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. My father cleared his throat. "Rachel, we've made mistakes. The bank is about to foreclose. We're losing the house." I stared at him, then at my mother, who refused to meet my eyes. "And you think I should fix it? After everything you said to me? After pushing me out?" "It's not about the past," my father said, his voice cracking. "It's about survival. We're desperate." I laughed bitterly. "Funny how suddenly, I'm not such a disgrace when you need me." My mother finally snapped. "Don't act like you're some saint, Rachel. You abandoned this family. You left when we needed you most. You think money erases that." Her words cut deep, but I refused to flinch. I looked her straight in the eye and said, "No, but maybe your pride will cost you everything." The room fell into heavy silence. My father's hands trembled as he held his coffee mug, staring at the floor like a man drowning. My mother's face hardened further, her pride locking her jaw. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about money. This was about wounds that had never healed, scars that would never fully fade. Saving their home meant reopening every old cut, and I wasn't sure if I was strong enough to survive the bleeding. A week later, I found myself sitting across from my father at the kitchen table, papers spread out between us. The air smelled faintly of stale coffee and damp wood, a reminder of how far the house had slipped from its once proud condition. My mother stayed in the living room, pretending to read, but I could feel her presence like a shadow in the corner of my my father slid a folder toward me. "This is everything," he whispered, his voice weighed down by shame. I opened it, expecting a few overdue bills, maybe a small loan. But what I saw made my stomach drop. Mortgage statements, notices from creditors, and a thick letter from the bank all painted the same picture. They owed $350,000. Not a penny less did I blinked at the numbers, certain I had read them wrong. This isn't just debt. This is a disaster. How did it get this bad? My father rubbed his temples. "We thought we could handle it. We refinanced the house, twice. Then your mother's idea, investments in a friend's business. It failed. And we kept quiet because we thought we'd fix it before anyone found out." My hands shook as I flipped through the pages. I saw my mother's signature again and again, her stubborn pride written in ink on contracts she never should have signed. I looked up at her. "You knew all along, didn't you?" She didn't even glance up from her book. "We were trying to protect this family. You wouldn't understand." That word, protect, rang in my ears like a cruel joke. Protecting the family? They had hidden the truth until it was too late, until their backs were against the wall. And now, suddenly, I was supposed to clean up the wreckage? I felt a rush of anger surge through me. "You didn't protect anyone. You gambled with the roof over your heads, and now you're asking me to pay the price." My father's eyes filled with tears, but he didn't defend himself. He simply whispered, "Rachel, we have nowhere else to turn." In that moment, the weight of their desperation crushed me. For the first time, I understood the full cost of their mistakes, not just the money but the trust, the years of silence, the arrogance. And yet, beneath my fury, a dangerous thought slipped into my mind. If I don't step in, they will lose everything, and that terrified me more than the debt itself. A few days later, I went through the pile of unopened envelopes my father had shoved into a shoebox, too overwhelmed to even glance at them anymore. Bills, final notices, threats from creditors. It was a graveyard of paper and red stamps. But one envelope stood out. It was thick, heavier than the others, and addressed not to my parents, but to me. My breath caught as I tore it open. Inside was a formal letter from the bank. At first, I thought it must have been a mistake, but the words made my hands go cold. "Notice of delinquency, loan account in your name, my name, my address, my social security number." Everything was correct. Did I read it twice, then a third time, my vision blurring with rage. They hadn't just made bad financial decisions. They had used my identity, taken out a loan in my name, and never told me. I stormed into the living room, the letter crumpled in my fist. "Do you want to explain this?" I demanded, my voice trembling with fury. My mother barely looked up from her seat. "It was for the family. You wouldn't understand. You stole my name, my credit, my future." I shouted, the words tearing out of me like fire. "Do you realize this could ruin me? If this goes on my record, I'll never qualify for a loan, never buy a home of my own, never." My father rose slowly, his face pale. "Rachel, please. We thought we could handle it before it caught up to you. We didn't want to burden you." "Burden me?" I cut him off, my voice sharp. "You forged my identity. You didn't want to tell me because you knew I'd never agree to it." For a moment, the room went silent except for the sound of my mother turning a page in her book. Finally, she said coldly, "You're exaggerating. You've always been dramatic. We did what we had to do." Her indifference hit me harder than the betrayal itself. I felt sick, dizzy with anger. The people who had once called me a disgrace had just proven they were willing to disgrace me to save themselves. And that instant, something inside me shifted. I realized that helping them wouldn't just mean paying their debts. It would mean untangling myself from the lies they had wrapped me into. And if I didn't act fast, their mess would become my prison too. The letter still burned in my hand when I confronted my mother again the next evening. I had barely slept, my thoughts racing between fury and disbelief. When I stepped into the kitchen, she was already there, standing at the counter, stirring sugar into her tea as if nothing was wrong. I slammed the letter down on the table. We're not pretending this doesn't exist, Mom. You forged my name. You crossed the line. She didn't flinch. We saved you from yourself. You've always been selfish, Rachel. We did what was necessary for this family. I laughed bitterly, the sound sharp and hollow. Necessary? You call identity theft necessary? You didn't save me. You dragged me into your mess without my consent. Her face twisted with anger. Oh, listen to yourself. Always the victim. You left this house, you abandoned your family, and now you want to play the martyr? You think your little job and your little savings make you better than us. My blood boiled. I am better than this. Better than lying, cheating, and destroying everyone around me just to keep up appearances. Her hand slammed against the counter. Don't you dare talk to me like that. We raised you, fed you, gave you everything, and this is how you repay us? By judging us like a stranger. You didn't raise me, you broke me. I snapped, my voice cracking under the weight of years of silence. And now you want me to clean up your disaster while you spit in my face? For the first time, my father tried to step in, his voice trembling. Enough, both of you. This isn't helping. But I couldn't stop. The anger I had buried for years came pouring out. You called me a disgrace, Mom. Remember that? You pushed me out and slammed the door behind me. Now suddenly I'm useful because I have money? No. You don't get to rewrite history. Her eyes flashed with something I couldn't quite place. Pride, fear, maybe even shame. But her words were ice cold. If you won't help us, then you're no daughter of mine. The silence that followed was suffocating. My father's shoulders sagged as he looked between us, torn apart by the war unfolding in his kitchen. I stared at my mother, realizing that no amount of money could ever buy the acceptance I had craved all my life. But the cruel twist was this. No matter how much I hated her words, I couldn't shake the sight of my father's weary face. He wasn't innocent, but he was drowning, and some part of me still wanted to throw him a lifeline, and that conflict, more than the debt, was tearing me apart. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, my brother Daniel decided to show his face. He hadn't been around for weeks, conveniently absent while I was the one digging through debt papers and arguing with our parents. But one Sunday afternoon, he strolled into the house like a guest who had nothing to do with the storm swirling inside. "Rachel," he said casually, dropping his jacket on the chair. "I hear you're thinking about helping out." I narrowed my eyes. Thinking is the right word. I haven't decided. He smirked, that same smug grin he wore back when we were kids, and he'd watched me get scolded while he escaped untouched. Well, you should. You're the one who actually made something of yourself. You've got the money. Makes sense you'd step up. My jaw tightened. Step up? Daniel, this isn't some small favor. It's $350,000. And last I checked, you're their son too. He leaned back in the chair, completely unbothered. I don't have that kind of money. I've got my own bills, my own family to think about. You're single, no kids. You're in a better position than me. It's logical. I felt heat rising in my chest. Logical? You mean convenient. You're fine letting me carry this alone while you walk away clean. His grin vanished, replaced by a sharp glare. Don't make this about fairness. Life isn't fair. You left, you did your own thing, and now you can actually give back. Consider it balancing the scales. Balancing the scales? I repeated, stunned. You're unbelievable. You've had years to step up, Daniel, and you never have. You want me to be the savior, so you can keep pretending you're not part of this mess. My father tried to cut in, his voice soft and pleading. Please don't fight. We need unity, not division. But Daniel wasn't done. He leaned forward, his voice low, almost venomous. Face it, Rachel. You're the only one who can fix this. And if you don't, maybe Mom was right all along. Maybe you really are a disgrace. The words hit like a knife. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My own brother, siding with the very people who had driven me away, twisting the knife deeper than even my mother had. That night, I drove home with my hands trembling on the steering wheel. Betrayal cut sharper than anger, and I realized something chilling. No one in that house truly wanted me. They just wanted what I could give, and now I had to decide if I was willing to give it all. For nights I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind tearing itself apart. Every argument replayed in my head, the coldness in my mother's eyes, the smugness in Daniel's voice, the desperation trembling in my father's hands. Each memory felt like a different chain pulling me in opposite directions. Logic told me to walk away. They didn't deserve my help. They had cut me out, spat on my choices, stolen my name, and now they were ganging up on me like vultures circling prey. A part of me wanted to let the bank take the house, to watch them finally face the consequences of years of arrogance and denial, but another part, quieter, heavier, kept whispering that I couldn't do it. This was still a house where I had grown up. The creaking stairs, the smell of my mother's cooking, the sound of my father's old records playing on Sundays. Memories I couldn't erase, no matter how hard I tried. Letting it all vanish felt like erasing pieces of myself. On the fourth sleepless night, I sat at my dining table with a pen and a notebook. I wrote down every reason to walk away and every reason to help. The walk-away list was long, filled with betrayal, pride, and selfishness. The help list was short, because I can. Because if I don't, I'll regret it forever. The next morning, I drove back to the house. My parents were sitting at the kitchen table, looking smaller than ever, like the weight of the world was pressing down on their shoulders. Daniel was nowhere to be seen. Of course, I took a deep breath and said, "I'll help, but on my terms." My father's head shot up, hope flooding his eyes. My mother stiffened, her lips pressing into a thin, angry line. "I'll cover the debt," I continued, "but only if the house is signed partially over to me. I'm not throwing my life savings into a black hole without protection. I'll become co-owner, and I'll have the authority to make financial decisions about this property moving forward. Otherwise, I walk." My mother slammed her hand on the table. "Over my dead body. You're not stealing our home." I didn't blink. "It's not stealing if I'm the one saving it. You either sign or you lose everything. The choice is yours." The silence that followed was suffocating. My father looked between us, torn apart, his eyes glistening with tears. My mother glared at me as though I were the enemy. And for the first time, I realized something painful but true. Helping them wouldn't heal the past. It would only expose it. Still, I had made my choice. And there was no turning back. The day of the signing felt heavier than any courtroom or job interview I had ever faced. I had arranged for us to meet at a local notary's office, a neutral ground where emotions were supposed to be kept in check. But the air inside that small, wood-paneled room crackled with tension the moment we walked in. My father looked exhausted, clutching a folder of documents like it was the last piece of dignity he had left. My mother, on the other hand, walked in with her chin raised high, dressed as though this was a social event rather than the moment that would decide the fate of her home. The notary, a calm middle-aged woman with glasses perched on her nose, laid the papers neatly on the table. "These documents will transfer partial ownership of the property to Rachel in exchange for covering the outstanding debt. Both signatures are required." I sat across from my parents, my heart pounding, a pen resting in front of me like a weapon. My father leaned forward immediately, his hand trembling as he signed the first page without hesitation. For a fleeting moment, I saw relief in his eyes. Then came my mother. She stared at the papers, her lips curling into a sneer. "This is theft. She's stealing our home right out from under us." I clenched my fists under the table.
"No, ma'am.
"This is saving your home. Without me, the bank takes everything. You lose the house, you lose it all. At least this way, you still get to live here." Her eyes blazed with fury. "I'd rather lose the house than hand it over to a daughter who abandoned us." The notary cleared her throat, sensing the explosion brewing. "Ma'am, without your signature, the agreement cannot be finalized. Foreclosure will proceed." My father's voice cracked as he turned to her. "Please, just sign it. Rachel is right. It's the only way." But my mother shoved the papers back across the table.
No.
"I will not put my name on this betrayal." The room froze. My father's face crumpled, the last threads of his patience unraveling. "Then you'll doom us all," he whispered. And with a sudden, desperate resolve, he pushed the papers back toward the notary. "I am signing for both of us. I am still on the deed. That is enough." The notary hesitated, then nodded slowly. Legally, his signature is sufficient. As my father's pen scratched across the page, my mother gasped as though the air had been ripped from her lungs. "You traitor," she spat at him. "You've chosen her over me." But I didn't answer. For the first time in years, I felt control shift into my hands. The papers were signed. The house was saved. And nothing between us would ever be the same again. The debt was settled within weeks. I wired the money, the foreclosure was halted, and the house was safe. On paper, it looked like a victory. But inside those walls, it felt like a battlefield where no one had truly won. My father tried to show gratitude in small, quiet ways, fixing me coffee when I visited, leaving awkward voicemails saying he owed me everything. His pride was wounded, but his relief was genuine. He had chosen survival over stubbornness, and though it cost him, I could see in his weary eyes that he knew it was the right decision. My mother, however, grew colder by the day. She refused to look at me, refused to acknowledge the sacrifice I had made. When I walked through the door, she left the room. When I tried to sit at the table, she pushed her chair back with a scrape loud enough to send chills down my spine. "You didn't save this house," she hissed once when my father wasn't in the room. "You stole it. You'll never be anything but a disgrace to me." The words should have broken me, but instead they built a wall inside my chest. I realized then that no amount of money, no act of sacrifice, would ever heal the wound between us. To her, I wasn't a daughter. I was a reminder of everything she had lost control of. Even Daniel, my brother, disappeared after the signing. He sent me a short message, "Glad you could handle it." That was it. No thank you, no apology, nothing. He left the burden squarely on my shoulders and slipped back into his comfortable life. The house was safe, but the family inside it was fractured beyond repair. Every visit felt like walking into enemy territory, my mother's silence like daggers, my father's apologies like ashes point one evening. As I stood in the hallway, staring at the faded family photos on the wall, I felt the weight of it all pressing down on me. I had saved the bricks, the wood, the roof, but the people who once made it a home were lost to me forever, and for the first time, I wondered if I had made the wrong choice. Months passed, and the house remained standing, safe from the bank's grip. On the outside, it looked like I had saved everything. But inside, the cracks were deeper than ever, and nothing could patch them. My father tried, in his quiet way, to bridge the gap. He called me often, thanked me endlessly, and once even broke down crying, whispering that he didn't deserve me. Part of me believed him. Part of me still saw the man who had once tucked me in at night, who had worked hard to put food on the table. But the other part, the part scarred by years of silence and betrayal, knew that no amount of gratitude could erase what had been done. My mother never forgave me. In her eyes, I had humiliated her, stolen control, and branded her pride with a scar she could never conceal. Each visit was a battlefield of silence, her glare a reminder that I would never be her daughter in the way I once longed to be. And my brother? He vanished entirely, comfortable in the shadows while I carried the weight of our family's ruin. I had given them everything they asked for, and in return, I had lost any hope of reconciliation. And yet, strange as it sounds, I don't regret my choice. I did what was right, not for them, not even for the house, but for me. Because I refused to let bitterness define me. I refused to walk away and spend the rest of my life wondering if I could have saved something worth saving. Here I am, telling you this story. If you've stayed with me until now, thank you. Life has a cruel way of testing us, of forcing us to face the people who hurt us most. But if there's one piece of advice I can give, it's this. Help if you can, but protect yourself first. Set boundaries, stand your ground, and never let guilt be the only reason you say yes. And if you found something in my story that spoke to you, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and share your thoughts. Your voice matters, sometimes more than you realize, because at the end of the day, even when family fails you, your own voice is what saves you.